Largely forgotten, the conflict over Western Sahara appears to be heating up again as a new round of UN-sponsored talks between the two sides gets underway. Are protesters asking simply for a better life, or are they seeking independence? And is the United Nations really capable and willing to bring this long-running conflict to an end? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Rida Fakhri. At least 7 people were killed and many more were injured when Moroccan forces raided a protest camp near Western Sahara's main city of Laayoune, which is under the military control of Morocco. The Gdaim Izik camp, which houses 12,000 refugees, had sprung up 4 weeks ago in protest against the deteriorating living conditions in the area and the ongoing political stalemate. The clashes are believed to have been some of the worst in the territory, which is a former Spanish colony that has been under Morocco's partial military control since 1975. Rabat says the territory should come under its sovereignty, while the Polisario Front, which fought a guerrilla war with Morocco for years, insists on a UN referendum that would enable the Sahrawi people to choose between autonomy, independence or integration with Morocco. The violence came shortly before another round of talks between Polisario representatives and Moroccan senior officials began in the United States. But this is just the latest in a series of rounds to resolve the two sides' differences. The latest move, proposed by Morocco, is an ongoing attempt to resolve the Western Sahara issue. In 2007, with the backing of the UN, both parties were invited to start talks, but 4 rounds of formal negotiations went virtually nowhere. The UN mediator, former US diplomat Christopher Ross, then proposed informal discussions. Both groups met again in August 2009 in Austria. These talks were described as frank and deep. Well, let's discuss all of this with our guests in London, Lamine Bali, Polisario representatives in the United Kingdom. In Rabat, political analyst Mustafa Khalfi. He's also a researcher at the government-run Mohammed V University. And in London, Stefan Simonowitz, a journalist who's written extensively on Western Sahara for British newspapers The Guardian and The Independent. Welcome to you all to the programme. Mustafa Khalfi, if the aim of these protests was to draw attention to this conflict, after all it is the longest running conflict in Africa, to put pressure on all sides to move this forward and reach a long overdue settlement, wasn't that fair game?
Yes, I agree with you that this social demand is urging all parties to find a political solution based on the idea of no winner, no loser, and this will help the population in the Sahara to prosper and to develop its life. I think with the ongoing informal talks, this what happened almost the last 4 weeks is a huge demand, and it is paralleled with the situation of the refugees in the camps. Almost 100,000 using the numbers of the United Nations are living in a bad situation. So
But why did the Moroccan police intervene? Wasn't this, after all, the legitimate right of the Sahrawis to protest, their right to the freedom of assembly and expression?
Yes, yes. This last Moroccan authorities' intervention to dismantle the camp outside Laayoune has happened after an agreement has been reached last Thursday between the coordinating committee and the local authorities. This agreement is based on providing jobs and lands for housing. But the problem that some groups who are connected with the Polisario tried to stop the implementation of this agreement, and they start politicizing the social demand and trying to transform the camp to a political entity.
Stefan Simonowitz,
so
is that the case, the way you see it? Was that a legitimate case of resistance by a people who, after all, are living under de facto occupation?
Well, I don't actually know the details of what have actually happened in the camps yesterday. What the situation is that quite a few international journalists weren't allowed access. No journalists have been allowed access to the camps. Even 3 Spanish politicians who were trying to get to the camps to observe over the weekend were not allowed into the country. So I can't really comment about the actual detail of what happened, but what I can say is that this situation is a expression of the frustration and the tragedy of the situation, which has gone on for 35 years without resolution. And what I do fear is that this could be the start of a more violence. We've seen violence spreading to Laayoune, rioting in the streets. Some of that frustration which has been built up in the frustration with the diplomatic process, which again has been unsuccessful in implementing international law in Western Sahara, because let's be clear here, there's a very clear breach of international law, firstly with the separation of the country by the Spanish, then the invasion by the Moroccans in 1975, which has been ongoing despite over 100 UN resolutions, despite an opinion from the International Court of Justice. And therefore there's an incredible frustration. It's very frustrating that the talks that were meant to be happening in New York today and yesterday have been delayed, but it's inevitable when clashes like this happen that having talks about talks in an atmosphere of mutual respect and understanding isn't going to be possible.
Lamine
That's
Bali,
the tragedy of this situation.
well, let me turn then to the representative of the Polisario Front. Lamine Bali, what led to these latest clashes? Was it a good time for these tensions to simmer and boil over, or should they have been peaceful protests that did not lead to clashes? What was the main trigger there?
I think it is quite important to point out this is as a result of accumulation of 35 years of occupation of Western Sahara by Morocco illegally against international law, as pointed out by Stefan, very clear. And number two, I just would like to refer to you that the figure which you haven't mentioned, it's the latest figure which I have. There are 11 dead and there are 723 wounded and 159, disappeared. And this is really the atrocity carried out by Morocco, which add the list of the crime against the Sahrawi people since 1975. What triggered this frustration, definitely, prevention from the exercise of their right, the looting of wealth of Western Sahara from Morocco, and also lack of securing freedom of expression, and also lack of political solution which respect the right of self-determination of Sahrawi people. You know very well that United Nations have dispatched a mission called MINURSO since 1991, and since then they try to organize a referendum promised by UN, by which the people of Western Sahara will express their right of self-determination to choose between independence or integration with Morocco, or autonomy. But in any way, Morocco prevents United Nations from doing so, and people, they're just fed up.
Let's ask then Mustafa Khalfi. King Hassan II, in fact, accepted the idea. He signed on to the idea and the principle of self-determination. Morocco, of course, considers this territory annexed, but no other country accepts the sovereign territorial claims of Morocco, not even its closest allies, including France and the United States. What is holding Morocco back? Why won't it accept this principle that it signed up to originally of self-determination? Is it simply too scared to lose the support of the Sahrawi people?
Yes. The first thing is that Morocco, he is the first who went to the United Nations and put the Western Sahara, Spanish Sahara, within the fourth committee as territory that should be decolonized. Secondly, Morocco doesn't annex it. There was an agreement between Spain and Morocco and Mauritania in 1975, and this agreement, the Madrid agreement, led to that Morocco become the authority, the administrative authority of this area. Thirdly, the most important thing that Morocco, until now, the idea of organizing a referendum, he agreed with it. But what should be the question of this referendum? Morocco is asking that this area should have a political solution like that we saw it in North Ireland.
Precisely,
between Britain and North Ireland.
Why won't Morocco accept that? And just to set the record straight, the International Court of Justice's ruling back in 1975 accepted the idea of, quote, loose linkages between the Moroccan government, if you'll allow me to finish, loose linkages between the Moroccan government and some Sahrawi tribes. That goes back to the 17th, 18th century. But allow me just to finish this idea. The ICJ was also very clear in its conclusion that these linkages do not support Morocco's territorial claim. I have to go here to Lamine Bali to ask about what the Polisario Front is doing about this, and whether it is changing its tactics by taking the fight now to the interior of Moroccan-controlled Western Sahara.
Well, let me point out also that the Court of Justice is very clear in its verdict. You know, they say they call for the right of self-determination of the Sahrawi people. And your guest from Morocco tried to refer to the tripartite agreement. This tripartite agreement is completely unaccepted, and it is not supported by any international law. It's trying to divide Western Sahara between Morocco and Mauritania. And if Morocco claimed Western Sahara as a part of Morocco, why he did accept to divide it with Mauritania and vice versa for Mauritania? Number two, I think what's happening that Morocco is very selective in its expression to justify its illegal occupation to Western Sahara. And also in the last verdict by the legal advisor of United Nations, Hans Corell, 2002, confirmed that the people of Western Sahara need to have and should have and have the right to exercise of the right of self-determination in free will into the United Nations supervision. What's happening now? Morocco tried to dictate the fait accompli. They try to say, take it or leave it autonomy. That is not, it's unfair, it's contradictory with international law. It is not going to be accepted neither politically or in any other circumstances. What we have asking now, we are asking that, you know, of course we are taking into consideration the concern of Morocco, the preoccupation of Morocco. We say, okay, let's go to the referendum. If referendum come up with independence, we will go with a privileged relationship with Morocco, and we will talk about all aspects and how we can go, how can we be a good neighbor to Morocco?
Fair point.
How can two states, Western
Sahara,
and also when it comes to the tactic.
Hold on if you would. Mustafa Khalfi, if this is indeed Moroccan territory, as the Moroccan government says, why then did Morocco initially agree to a referendum on self-determination, and why is it now seemingly changing the goalposts? Is it scared of an unfavorable outcome if the referendum took place?
No. We need to understand why the United Nations failed to implement the referendum. For almost 10 years they tried and they failed. There is a deep problem related to who is the people who are eligible to vote. The Polisarios, they didn't accept a lot of tribes. They come up with at least 150,000 of the people who are against the list of the voters. This is the first problem.
But there have been recently less restrictive identification criteria enabling Moroccan settlers who have been in the territory before 1990 to take part in this, and yet the Moroccan government won't accept it.
Let me continue, please. Sorry.
I wish you would take this point into account. Why has the Moroccan government insisted on refusing this while some Moroccan settlers who've been in the territory before 1980 would be eligible to take part in the referendum?
So let me answer to your question. Let me answer to your question. The answer is easy. Now there is an ongoing negotiations, and this negotiation should come up by the end how to organize a referendum. The questions, the people who are going to vote should be the outcome of these negotiations. Morocco has presented a proposal. Many international states said that it's a serious credible. So it's within the table. And Morocco is asking Polisario to be credible in these negotiations. This is the reality. So we are not, Morocco, it's not escaping from finding a political solution, but what's the content of this political solution?
Stefan Siminowicz.
The third thing.
Let's get Stefan Siminowicz's point of view on this. Is part of the problem also the fact that the United Nations has not been willing to forcefully push a settlement to this issue? After all, how difficult would it have been for the UN, with all of its resources, to organize a referendum? We're not talking about millions of people in Western Sahara. We're talking about, at the most, 500,000 people. Has the UN been complicit in this as well?
Well, I wouldn't like to say that. What I would say is that it is a technical issue, and the UN does need to step up its efforts here. But as well as the technical side, there needs to be the political will on both sides. And if one side refuses or complains about voter registration each time, as happened before with the Baker Plan, I think there were 30,000 complaints about voters, or it just became impossible to carry out the election. So MINURSA needs to do that, but it is about enforcing UN resolutions as well. When Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, UN passed resolutions which they enforced. When they've passed over 100 resolutions and those about Western Sahara which haven't been enforced. it's a difficult situation, and both sides do need to sit around the table. One of the key issues as well as to why international pressure hasn't really been brought to bear, why this issue has been forgotten so much, is also about the fact that the Western nations are benefiting from the resources of Western Sahara, again against international law. Phosphates from Western Sahara are a huge, important part of industrial agriculture across the world. And also there's oil and gas. There's also the fisheries agreement that the European Union has signed with Morocco, which allows us to fish those waters off Western Sahara, again against international law, which states that non-self-governing territories should have their resources kept for the population of that place.
So can there be any
so
solution
I think the UN
in sight?
does have a responsibility.
But can there be any solution in sight as long as the major powers, in this case France and the US, are, as you suggest, happy with the status quo, as long as, in many ways, like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the major powers aren't willing to exert enough pressure on the side that controls the territory militarily, in this case Morocco?
Well, it is changing. I mean, the status quo you're talking about is shifting very rapidly, as we see even with these riots and killings, casualties that happened the last few days. And I think with this issue becoming an international issue, there will be a urgency. And it reminds me a bit, I was working for the ANC back in the anti-apartheid struggle, and that period before the ANC and Nelson Mandela were liberated was a very difficult period. That was the state of emergency periods, and you often see this in conflicts like this. Often before a resolution, during the end game, things can flare up, and it is a concern, and this is why the United Nations do have to step in. They need to have a human rights monitoring mandate so they can watch what's happening in the country and prevent disasters like the one we saw on Monday morning happening again, because there is a real danger that this could flare up, and international community has a responsibility.
This could flare up, and Lamine Bali, there are clear signs the new generation, the younger Sahrawis, are growing increasingly dissatisfied with the leadership of the Polisario. They feel you haven't delivered on their national aspirations. They still languish in these refugee camps, and I visited some of them many years ago with the UN Secretary General at the time, Kofi Annan, and saw for myself the situations that people live in. Is there a chance then that if this situation continues to fester, there will be the risk that the Polisario will choose to return to armed struggle, as the Secretary General Mohammed Abdelaziz has often threatened he would?
I think it is about time that the international community to use a stick on the one who blocking the political solution, which respect the right of the people in Western Sahara. And I refer here to the European Union. They need to cancel their advanced status being given to Morocco, and also they need to cancel, the fishing agreement which being signed between Morocco and the European Union in 2006 as a means of pressure on Morocco to go in the right directions. In connection of the possibility of organizing a referendum or not, yes, there is a possibility, and it's not being blocked because the people eligible to vote. On the contrary, the United Nations
beyond that, after 3.5 decades of no solutions, no tangible results, are you being challenged by the younger generation who want a different approach?
Yeah. That's true. That's true. That's quite true, because everybody is frustrated, and there is a pressure on us to go back to war and to resume fighting. But I think that option it is not excluded at all, and we just hope there is still a margin of maneuver by which international community can prevent that from happening, and this is the right time. Morocco have continued violating human rights in occupied territory, documented by all major human rights organizations, and also their behavior, their atrocity, their barbaric attack against civilians in the Gdemizik camp, and 20,000 people living there, civilians without any arm. That is another example of the Moroccan crime. Yes, there is a possibility
we do
that
have to
war can be
give Mustafa
prevented.
Khalfi the option to respond to these accusations. And if I may just ask a question here about whether, beyond the legality of this issue and international law, has it been, from the political standpoint, worth it for the government of Morocco to continue to drain all of its resources, military, financial, into this conflict with no end in sight and in a way that lacks transparency. Human rights organizations across the board have criticized the Moroccan government for not allowing international journalists in to really tell us what is going on.
Yes, the first thing that I know some journalists who used to have to stay in the camps, Sombrero from El País. So some journalists are allowed to publish articles from the city. Second thing is we need to take into account the lessons of the former UN envoy, Valsom. After 4 rounds of negotiations between 2007 and 2008, he said that we need to move toward the realistic approach, realistic solution. Thirdly, the problem about human rights, it's parallel in the camps in Tindouf and in Morocco. Human Rights Watch has published a report in 2008, and recently they published a declaration about the situation of a former leader in the Polisario who now believes in the autonomy plan, and he defended the autonomy plan, but now he is jailed in the camps. Fourthly, the problem with the Polisario, they didn't take into account that in 2003 they agreed with the second plan of Baker. The first plan Baker, they refused it. So they have this idea of putting the large autonomy as a possible solution to this problem. So this is the fourth. The fifth thing that we need to take also into account, that what, as you may see in the photo from the city of Laayoune, that we didn't see a peaceful protest against Morocco. We see some violent activities that people who are connected with the Polisario try to do it. So it's not an issue of
Stefan, well, let me just bring in Stefan Simonowicz for the final word on this. What is the end game, Stefan?
Well, that remains to be seen, but it's interesting you talk there about the cost, and I think as we've seen here, it's the human cost of the people, the Sahrawis who are living there, but also the Moroccans, of the Moroccan servicemen have been killed, and also the cost of the financial cost to Morocco of occupying the country, as well as the political cost, as well as the reputational cost on the international stage, because Morocco has an important role to play in the world stage, and this situation, which is a blight upon its record, is getting worse. And I think the end game will only come when there is international pressure, that when there are outcries not just from our governments, because it's too important an issue to be left to the politicians, but an outcry across the world from people saying, look, this has gone on for too long. This needs to be stopped right now.
And we'll have to leave it there. And thanks to all our guests in London, Lamine Bali, in Rabat, Mustafa Khalfi, and in London, Stefan Simonowicz. And thank you for watching. We do welcome, as always, your comments and suggestions. You can email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. From all of us here, thanks for watching.